You are listening to the Toxic Mold Podcast with Steve Worsley, the toxic mold expert and your number one source for mold consulting and mitigation in the USA. Let's dive into a brand new episode.
Before we get started on this episode, here's a not-so-short disclaimer. While all attempts have been made to verify the content provided in this podcast, neither the podcaster nor the producers assume any responsibility for errors, omissions, or alternative interpretations of the issues discussed here. All information stated in this podcast is the opinion of Steve Worsley. Steve Worsley is a mold specialist with over 25 years of experience in the construction and mold industry. The Toxic Mold Podcast is for information sharing purposes only. The views expressed are those of the podcaster and his alone. These views should not be taken as expert instruction or commands. While there may be references to medical conditions and symptoms, all podcast episodes are the opinion of Steve Worsley, and any medical questions or concerns shall be addressed with the appropriate licensed medical professional or professionals. As the podcaster refers to different mold types, please be aware that Steve Worsley is not a microbiologist, and questions concerning mold specifics should be answered by the appropriate professional. Steve isn't, nor does he offer any legal advice. For any legal advice, you must speak to a lawyer. The listener is 100% responsible for his or her own actions. You can check out Steve's books on Amazon. Just go to Amazon and search for author Steve Worsley. You can also take Steve's mold education courses, such as Mold 101 and the Mycotoxin Prevention Kit, by going to cnccontractorservices.com. Again, check out his mold education courses at cnccontractorservices.com. Now, let's get to the episode.
Hello, you're listening to the Toxic Mold Podcast with myself, Steve Worsley, and we have my wife, Cassandra. August is here.
Yes, it is. Warm as ever.
Yeah, it's at least cooling off at night, though.
A little bit.
A little bit, yeah. So today's topic, we've talked about this numerous times, but it's a question I get all the time. Can I take my belongings from my toxic mold home? How often do you hear me talk about that?
All the time, because there's lots of belongings that are cellulose-based material, like photographs and degrees and birth certificates and passports and all kinds of things that you can't replicate easily.
Yeah, speaking of those types of things, though, I don't know, you've had to do it, but when you change your name, don't you, like from Auburn, you get a new degree, correct?
You do, but they charge you an arm and a leg, and why should you have to spend that money twice?
You do?
Like 200,
okay.
But like, it's not cheap.
Okay. Well, I guess what I was going to say is once again, let's just say someone's house caught on fire. There are things they would lose that they would have to replace. And I guess my point is all these things can be replaced. I just didn't know what a pain it would be.
Absolutely. I just think that most people never really think about their keepsakes, their photos especially, as can I bring it to the next place? But, you do hear the question a lot, like it was my grandmother's couch.
Right.
And it's a family heirloom and it's made of fabric. I can't part with it.
Yeah. And once again, and our listeners hear me say this nonstop, every situation is unique. So, there are times when we go in and we do a full toss out, meaning for our listeners, what we do is we go in and get rid of everything. Mm-hmm. And then do an SPC. There are times when people say, well, this was my great-grandmother's couch, it's fabric, I don't want to part with it. We're willing to spend $500, $5,000, I don't know, X amount of dollars to salvage it. So for our listeners, this is why, once again, every situation is unique. But there are things that we look at. How porous is it? So when you think about if you took a glass of water and you tried to pour it through this desk, what would happen? It wouldn't pour through the desk.
No, it wouldn't.
The water would run, it would do whatever. If you had a couch and you were doing the same thing, what would happen?
It would go right through the fabric.
Exactly. Same thing with mycotoxins, mold spores, endotoxins, all sorts of stuff. So those are things that we consider. How porous is it? Another thing that we really look at, we kind of talked about it, what's the cost to replace it?
Exactly.
And some things, it's irreplaceable. Mm-hmm. So, that's something else that our listeners have to think. Well, I can't replace my great-grandmother's chair. So, there's testing we can do. There are things we can do to try to salvage that. But at the end of the day, because it's fabric, it should go.
Yeah. And so you tend to use the rule of thumb that depending, each situation is unique, but depending, fabric furniture probably should not go with you to the next place.
Exactly.
Okay.
Now,
what about mattresses?
So that's something that there are a couple of things, in my opinion, that must go. Mattresses, fabric couches, those big bean bag thingies that you sit on, stuffed animals, stuff like that just must go.
Yeah. And so there used to be, and maybe there still are, there used to be hotel liquidator companies that would sell used mattresses at a cheap price. Is that typically a bad idea for people to purchase because of what mold and bed bugs and other things, even though they claim they wash them? But is that a bad idea to get a used mattress? Okay.
We've never purchased a mattress. We have sold one, though.
Yes.
It was fairly new. We keep covers on ours. So, but yeah, you mentioned some of the stuff. Can you imagine what stuff would be in that mattress?
No, I agree. I totally agree.
Like skin fragments and
all kinds, not just mold.
Exactly.
Yeah. So again, anything that is porous, like a mattress, a stuffed animal. What about things like towels and clothes?
For the most part, you can clean those things.
Oh, you can send them somewhere.
Yeah, you can. You can take them to a laundromat. And when I tell my clients this, I'm like, yeah, but who knows what's in that washing machine at the laundromat? Mm-hmm. You can have them dry cleaned. There's different things you can do. For the most part, for our listeners, as long as you don't have mold in your washing machine or your dryer, you can wash it with like EC3. There's all sorts of different detergents you can use and chemicals.
Okay.
Like a lot of people will say vinegar and borax. As you know, I don't really go down that path as far as cleaning clothing because we don't do that.
Yeah.
Obviously, I know a lot more about cleaners that we use on stuff.
Well, when it comes to clothes, just say somebody says, okay, I've had enough of my moldy home. I'm moving out until we get this thing fixed. And it's the day that they're moving out. Maybe they're going to an Airbnb. Some people get really extreme about these things. Now, then they're like, we all are wearing the clothes that we got out of this house. Should they go to Walmart or Target, buy a new pair of clothes, pay for it, change in the Target bathroom into the new pair of clothes, put the old clothes in the Walmart bags, and toss them before they go to the Airbnb?
Well, that's a bit extreme. And so...
But people think that way.
I agree. But if my client were to ask me that, I would say, okay, so obviously you have cross-contamination concerns, correct? Mm-hmm. But what about the car you're driving?
Oh, boy. Now you're really sending them over the edge.
So... And I guess my point is for our listeners, as our listeners know, unless you're brand new, I don't go to that extreme.
You're not an alarmist.
Exactly. Because then I would ask those same questions.
Because it's about the toxic load or the dose.
Yeah.
Right?
We're just trying to lower that exposure.
Okay.
In all reality, like what if you have a friend that has a hidden mold problem and you go to their house once a week?
Yeah. Got it. There's
just so many what ifs, and I know it's whataboutism, but for our listeners, it's just, and I say this all the time, and it's easy for me to say, it's mind over matter. If you're going to let it freak you out, it's going to freak you out.
Well, because there are so many people who are living in moldy homes, and they are resorting to, living in the middle of the desert outside.
Yeah,
They're
sleeping in a tent.
Sleeping in a tent. They're resorting to, what else have I heard? Being anywhere but home. Like only going home to actually sleep, but then spending the rest of the time outside of the home because they're in a moldy home. You've got people who are literally, bankrupting themselves because they think that any amount of exposure to mold is going to hurt them dramatically.
Yeah. And that's where... And our listeners know I say this all the time. That's why it's so important to have an IEP, indoor environmental professional, on board that's walking you through that whole process.
And who's not an alarmist.
Exactly. And they have to know what they're doing.
Yeah.
I've worked with numerous IEPs. Some are really good, some are not. That's important. Mm-hmm. Because, most of the time when I get the clients, and there's plenty of circumstances where I'm the first one that they come to. But most of the time, they've spent thousands and thousands of dollars. They read on a Facebook group that you're supposed to throw all your mattresses away. They went and replaced the mattresses, but never dealt with the mold issue.
Yeah.
Or they thought they dealt with the mold issue, but they paid a company to come in and fog. That's where it's so important for all of our listeners. As I say all the time, I do complimentary discovery calls. Trust me, reach out to me or a good IEP first so that we can walk you through everything.
Well, and you bring up a really good point. There is an order of operations to dealing with a mold situation. And I do think a lot of people jump to throwing their belongings away and buying new things before they've even handled the mold situation or the root cause of the mold situation, which is out of order. You're just going to buy the new things and then have mold in the new thing.
What I just compared to that example, they literally had to go buy a new mattress again.
Yeah. Because they didn't do it in the right order.
Right. And that's why I think it's so important to get the IEP involved. But it brings up a good topic. So for our listeners, let's say you're one of those listeners and you're like, okay, Steve, you're talking about all this, but give us some examples. Like, what can I keep? What do I have to throw out? Can I keep my grandmother's couch? There are the things that we look at. How porous is it? So you can see this desk. That's of no concern. If we look around in my office, there's a fabric chair sitting over there. That's your mother's.
Exactly. I grew up with that chair.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Obviously, I have the expertise. If you could not part with that, we would figure out ways to salvage that. So for our listeners, you have to just look at what's the cost to replace it. Some things have sentimental value, so there's no cost. Mm-hmm. You're not willing to part with it. We can do some testing on that.
Okay. So you can actually test furniture.
Yes.
Oh, wow. I didn't know you could do that for mold.
You can do, and it's interesting because I just watched a webinar with Resper Air Labs. Mm-hmm. And they have a air sampling for mycotoxins, and then they have a surface sampling. It's called an EMEA and a MESA. Well, I asked their rep, so because the surface sample, you don't have to buy the pump and everything, is that, would that work if I were to do that instead of the air? And she's like, I wouldn't recommend it unless you're testing a piece of furniture. So that's a mycotoxin test. We just talked about testing methods. That's a more expensive test, but we could do a tape lift. And I'd take the biotape, put it on the cushion, push it down a little bit, put it back in its slide, send it off to the lab, and see what types of molds are in there. Now, you grew up with that chair. It's probably likely it's been exposed to mold.
Oh, I bet. That's what I was going to say. Like, I'm sure it has been.
So for our listeners, are you willing to spend the money to test for it? To do the true testing, you would have to do either a mold species, which is a qPCR, or a mycotoxin test. If I only did a tape lift, remember what we talked about last week. It only tells us the mold type.
Exactly.
Let's go to the next step. So let's say we test it and it's full of all sorts of different molds. What can you do next? Well, we would HEPA vacuum it. Mm-hmm. We would fog it. We could put it in a room, run an ozone machine for a few days and an air scrubber. There are things you can do to try to salvage that. So for our listeners, don't just think, well, it's my in-laws' couch, so I don't really care, but my spouse probably really does care. Mm-hmm. There are things you can do to salvage it.
You just have to decide
You're taking a risk.
If it means enough to you to A, pay for what time and money for what it would take to salvage it, and B, even at that, if you're willing to risk that it still didn't solve the problem at the end of the day.
Exactly.
Okay.
So let's kind of go through a short list real quick before we end this episode, because I'm sure our listeners are wondering. So in this office, just name something and then I'll tell you how you would treat it, or if you could keep it.
There's a pillow in that folding chair.
I would throw it out.
Okay, gone.
Yep. We have a TV on the wall. What about a TV?
No, that's non-porous.
The catch to that is, this tower for our computer, that's non-porous, right?
Yeah.
But it has a little fan on the back and a lot of tiny components
porous.
You can't get to.
Okay.
We probably wouldn't throw that TV out, but we'd look at it and go, how much is it to replace that?
Exactly.
You can, for the most part, salvage that.
So what about the Dale Jr. canvas? That is porous.
So for our listeners, I have a canvas on my wall that is a picture of Dale Jr. in the Budweiser 8 car.
Yep, NASCAR.
Has his autograph. I have the COA, Certificate of Authenticity. You can see the number on that. It's 4 of 8. There's only 8 of those.
Yeah, it's rare.
So what do you think I would do with that?
You would salvage it.
I would keep that.
Yeah.
I would do everything I could to keep that. Yep. And so it's a very porous thing. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't spray chemicals on it because it would probably discolor it.
Yep.
But I would salvage that. But it's because of the sentimental value.
Correct. But then you salvage anything you choose to salvage, you're salvaging at your own risk.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So for our listeners, like we have a wine rack over there. You can wipe those wine bottles down.
Mm-hmm.
We have
a good wrench service teddy bear. That's a stuffed animal, and that's a NASCAR thing.
Yeah.
Would you salvage that?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, boy.
Because that's a Dale Earnhardt bear. So for our listeners, obviously, I'm a NASCAR
Dale
fan.
Earnhardt.
And then we have a ceramic bear above us.
Then another
We have helmets
bear
that are autographed.
Yep.
I have die-cast cars that are autographed. So just depending on what it is how I would treat it. But keep in mind for our listeners, so we mentioned the TV. Something like a deep freeze or a refrigerator. Most people quickly say, well, it's not porous, it's metal for the most part. But just keep in mind, they have fans on those.
And so then that's where the porous part is.
It's not porous, it's just components you can't really get to.
Exactly.
Does that make sense?
So then if somebody's listening to this and they're like, okay, I'll throw out the mattresses, I'll throw out the pillows, I'll throw out the stuffed animals, but I'm keeping the photos and I'm keeping the antique couch and I'm keeping the things that have sentimental value to me. How do they go about then testing the things they want to keep?
So you could just, like I said, it depends on the type of or amount of money you want to spend and the type of testing.
Okay.
But for now, you could put, like, let's say all the pictures, you could put them in a tote that is obviously airtight.
Airtight, okay.
Now, the reason I mention that is if you live in Florida or in a humid area, you don't want to put it in something where the humidity just promotes mold growth.
No, not at all.
Like out west, you can throw stuff in a storage unit unless there's a leak in the roof. It's not going to be humid in there.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
That does make sense.
But you can put it in a neutral location. You can rent those storage containers. I don't even know what they're called, but we see them all the time on semis. And remember when my sister moved to Arizona.
Oh, that's right. Pods. Yes. You could rent that. So definitely the testing can run in the hundreds, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Would the testing cost ballpark ever run into the thousands?
Could, depend on how many things
and
the type of testing you're doing.
Wow.
You think about, we talked about the MESA test, which is the surface mycotoxin test. Mm-hmm. I believe they're over $200 a test.
Wow.
Whereas just a normal tape lift surface sample, that's a traditional test, you're talking $30 a test.
Okay.
So, does that make sense?
So it's like, what is it worth to you?
Yeah. And we have a list that we've created. We haven't quite finished it yet, but I think we're going to make it a digital bundle.
Yes, it'll be a digital bundle that will be for sale at some point. We can't guarantee when, but at some point
it's pretty much wrapped up.
Yeah.
We just have to kind of go through it, and it'll be, when we sell it on the site, it'll be cheap.
Absolutely.
We're talking like $20.
But it'll be worth it.
But it'll have a checklist. It'll have an explanation of the things we talked about.
Yep, a full list of all the possible things to consider, and then which ones, it'll be very helpful and educational.
And until that comes out, just for our listeners, just grab you a notebook and write a list of all the stuff and decide. Talk with your spouse, your kids, whoever's in the home, and say, okay, what can we part with and what are we not willing to part with?
Absolutely.
And then start going down is it porous? What's the material? Is it wood? Is it metal? Make sense?
It does make sense. So what's your call to action for people?
We talked about it numerous times. Don't be the alarmist.
Yeah.
And think you have to throw everything out.
And work with an IEP who can help you navigate this whole process and the order of operations.
Exactly. So we appreciate all you listeners. Have a great week.
Thanks for listening to this episode. If you're concerned about toxic mold and the health of your home, mycotoxin testing could be your next step. Visit CNC Contractor Services to discover how easy it is to test for harmful mycotoxins, compounds released by toxic molds. These comprehensive testing kits can help you identify hidden threats in your air, dust, and surfaces. When you purchase mycotoxin testing from Steve Worsley, you can also opt to get expert testing and interpretation directly from Steve. Take control of your indoor air quality today. Check out mycotoxin testing at cnccontractorservices.com.